Let's talk about miniatures. I've been known to do some role-playing. Now, I was lucky enough to play a game with my girlfriend this week in Frostgrave, where warbands led by wizards raid an ancient haunted city of magical treasures and gold. So there's a bit of a buzz about this new fantasy skirmish game. And while I talk about it, I'm going to show you some terrain I made for the game, and also I'm going to convert the HeroClix Jinku. I think Avengers Chaos War was the set Jinku comes out of, and I'm going to make him a wizard for the game. Before I talk about that, I need to talk about the book. Firstly, it's really affordable. The Kindle version's only $11 on Amazon right now. Reduction is great, and the ratio of fluff to rules is amazing. Like, there's maybe 5 pages of fluff and 100 pages of rules and stats. And when I say there's 100 pages of rules, don't think that it's like some weighty tome that requires an Excel spreadsheet and like a triple-digit IQ to play. It's actually a very easy game to learn. If you have any experience with any Games Workshop's game, or HeroClix, or Battletech, Frostgrave is going to be a cakewalk for you. The layout of the book is so well organized that I found myself double-checking rules during the game, finding those rules and doing that in seconds and getting my answer, and it just kept the game moving on the first playthrough. And I don't have tabs or anything in my book. That's just how well laid out the game is. There's a great table of contents in the beginning. The game is just structured in a very straightforward way that makes it really easy to play, and I've never experienced anything like that. And I didn't really need to check the rules often either. It's also full of original artwork and photographs of masterfully painted miniatures, all of which are top shelf, and good pictures of terrain as well. And the book has this like really solid feel to it, like it's designed to take abuse from like the greasy hands of guys who eat pizza and drink soda at the game table. It's not going anywhere. It's nice. So how was the game itself? Well, a lot of fun. There's a real focus on magic. The main characters on every force is a wizard and his apprentice, so you get to fire off like 2 spells every round, and the spells are crazy. They're hired swords also, filling out the ranks, and they're expendable, and they're largely at the mercy of the spellcasters. Magic is wild and unpredictable. Like, it can be injuring your spellcaster 1 minute and guaranteeing him victory in the next. It's all about how the rolls come out. I mean, sure, spells are situational, but saving throws for spells are based on how you roll, and some spells stay in effect throughout the game and can only be challenged with a saving throw. So if you cast it very powerfully with a very high roll, and you can even empower magic using your own life points, you can have very powerful spells in effect throughout the game. It's kind of cool like that. On the other hand, if you miss a spell by a lot, or if you keep missing spells every time, by a decent margin, you're going to take damage. There's kind of a fun tension in the game because the setting itself is hostile. We played the Mausoleum scenario where a skeleton is generated at the center of the board every turn, and it really added another level of strategy as I used a spell to push those skeletons towards my girlfriend, and she had to deal with them. The game is also different from a lot of other games in that the focus is on securing treasure, and combat is just a byproduct of that. Like, you can focus on magic that makes your warband move faster and spells that move the treasure closer to you instead of combat spells, and you can just grab treasure and run. Once all the treasure's off the board, the game's over. Or once all miniatures on one side have been killed, the game is over. You don't need to necessarily build an army that's designed to scrap. Now, probably most people will, and it probably is a more solid strategy, but you've got options, and that's cool. You can build, there's a lot of customization, there's a lot of different magic spells you can choose, and a lot of different schools of magic. It's also a lot of fun to try to grab a treasure and get away with it while a superior force is hot on your tail. There's a mechanic in combat where if you win combat, you can either jump your character out of it an inch, or push the character, I shouldn't say character, the miniature, that lost away from you an inch. And then from there on, if that was your first action, you can then move your character away. So you can, if you're carrying treasure, you can get out of combat. Although you are hindered by your treasure too. It's going to make you move at half speed and make you fight not so well with a big sack of gold on your back. Now, one thing that did surprise us both, my girlfriend and I, was the way in which ranged weapons were really not effective. They have a very limited range, only 24 inches, and we were playing on a 4x4 area. And ranged attacks are just subject to a lot of penalties that melee attacks don't suffer from, like intervening terrain and other miniatures in the way. And if you moved and now you're trying to shoot, that's a penalty as well. And melee attacks don't suffer from any of that. And there's also melee bonuses you can get for, having people with you, and you don't get any of that. If you have superior numbers, you get a pretty solid bonus in this game as you horde somebody, and you can't get that with arrows. So there were probably about 28 arrows let loose in the game, and only 2 did any damage at all. I'm not kidding. And just arrows, you get to the point where you're just not afraid of them. We both took 4 ranged characters. I took 4 archers, Sidra took 2 archers and 2 crossbowmen, and they just didn't mean anything unless they were in melee. We ended up putting them into melee because arrows just aren't effective. And when you come from a game like 40K where most of the units have effective ranged attacks, it can be a little bit of a shock, but I imagine this is done to make the wizards masters of ranged combat in this game. And I think if archers were as effective in Frostgrave as they are in Warhammer Fantasy, then people would probably just take archers and the game would quickly devolve into just a shootout. They would just shoot each other, and then whoever had miniatures left standing would claim all the treasure, and that would be every game. So I can understand why they did it. It's just something I'm giving you a heads up on, so you don't take half your force as archers, as we both did, and maybe take one just to try it out. I don't think you'll be pleased. I think mostly you want to get melee characters. And there is a variety, too. There's a lot of the standard fantasy classes you can hire on. There's literally an adventurer. He's called a treasure hunter. There's a thief. There's an apothecary. There's a tracker who's basically your ranger. There's a barbarian. There's a knight. So, and what that affects is how they're geared out, how much armor they have, how well they fight, and the cost goes up for better classes, of course. But those characters are kind of static. As your wizards can grow in levels and get more spells and their stats can raise, the mercenaries are just they're stuck at level 1 forever. So which doesn't matter. We only played the one game, so they seemed fine. I imagine later on they will seem much more like pawns, but maybe that's when you have to start hiring the bigger classes exclusively. So excited about that. It seems like there's a lot of fun in the future for Sidra and I. Now, the game also does seem, speaking of long-term campaigns, the game does lack a balancing mechanic for when unbalanced forces, like a level 20 wizard, it matches up against the first level wizard. Level 20 is just going to mop up that first level. So I think a little bit of house rules might need to come into play to keep matches like that interesting. One thing you might do is expand the lower level wizard's starting area, maybe like an inch per level, up to a certain point, and then start shrinking the higher wizard's starting area, again, maybe an inch per level, and then after that, maybe let the lower level wizard place an extra treasure where they want to, because everyone gets to place 1 treasure, so maybe let them place 2, and because you want to keep it interesting. It's not fun if you're just going to mop up your opponent, so give them a little advantage tactically at the beginning of the game. Let them have a shot. Let it be fair. That's what I say. That's what we're going to try to do if it ends up being lopsided in our game anyway. I think that's the plan. One of the most interesting things about Frostgrave are the 10 schools of magic. Each of these schools is aligned with other schools, or neutral towards other schools, or opposed to one of the other schools of magic. And a wizard from one school will find it much more difficult to cast a spell from an opposing school. And this idea of magic in opposition fascinates me. I mean, what exactly makes one type of magic opposed to another? Is it something in the magic's philosophy, or in its practice and rituals? Perhaps a bit of both. Now, let's get the most obvious one out of the way: thaumaturgy and necromancy, which is life magic and death magic. Now, these life mages are, for all intents and purposes, really no different from Dungeons & Dragons clerics, and they turn undead and they heal, and necromancers are exactly what you'd expect. This dynamic is pretty typical of fantasy games and doesn't really need further discussion. You've seen it in Heroes of Might and Magic, D&D, so many, it's just been done. So let's look at some of the other ones, like the Soothsayer and the Witch. And these are two schools in opposition in Frostgrave. Now, the Soothsayer would be known as a diviner in D&D terms, sends his senses throughout time and space to try to gather secret information he would otherwise not be privy to, and his own mind is his frontier, and all of his focus is on developing it. One could imagine that just requires much concentration, perhaps fasting or removal of all outside distractions. The Witch, on the other hand, is more of a hedge magician, and his magic comes from ingesting various compounds, conversing with animals. He's got animals around making noise all the time. His magic is very much rooted in the world around him. He brews poisons and potions, he alters the landscape, enlists the aid of animals to help him on the battlefield. He uses what's available in the environment around him immediately to gain an edge on the battlefield. So you can see how somebody, looking outward and somebody who looking at his immediate surroundings, they're very different. I think that's a really a neat opposition. Another two schools in opposition are the Elementalist and the Illusionist. Now, in the classical world, the elements were earth, fire, air, water, and Greek scholars believed that all things were made of these four elements, especially Captain Planet. But an Elementalist would be a master of substance. And what's the opposite of substance? How about light and shadow? The Illusionist is the master of light and shadow. Their spells only work on the mind, not matter. So the opposition is pretty easy to understand there as well. Also, you've got the Sigillist, is a master of warding off evil spells and protections against magic. And what's the main thing superstitious people have tried to ward off throughout history? Evil spirits. Well, he's in opposition with the Summoner, who calls demons to the battlefield to fight for him. He channels spirits into his men. He invites the dark magic in. The Sigillist is trying to ward it away. So the philosophical approach, someone being very cautious and very meticulous in reading and learning his craft, and someone who just grabs power by making deals with evil spirits, they're very different too. So that's great. That's 8. The last two are the Chronomancer and the Enchanter, and I think they were probably what was left, and they had to make them in opposition. I can't really see how they're in opposition of each other than sort of the Enchanter is putting magic into things, and Chronomancer doesn't deal with things, he deals with time, which is sort of a very nebulous concept. But otherwise, it just seems to be a sort of a gameplay opposition, because there are a lot of good combinations of Chronomancer and Enchanter spells, so I can see making those harder to cast just so you can't get them off as easily, because they are powerful. All in all, I think Frostgrave, for the money, is absolutely worth it. And I think I'll even take the for the money qualifier away. If the game was priced, I don't want to say like a Games Workshop game, because Christ, those are way too expensive. But if it was priced like something like D&D, I guess it has a sticker price of about $25, but boy, can you find it cheaper. I got mine for $18 on Amazon, nice hard copy cover. But my first impressions are very favorable. I'm going to be playing it quite a bit in the future. At least I hope so. I'm trying to rope people in. Let me know. Have you guys been playing it? Do you have good experiences, bad experiences? Hit me up. Leave a comment. This is the Fungeon Master signing out. Next time I'll do something funny, maybe. Who knows? Have a good one.